Welcome to Prime Suspects, alongside Adam Bjorn and Prime Sports co-founder Joe Brennan Jr. I'm your host, Matt Landis. Adam, as we'll do throughout the season, let's kick off with a weekend review across the NFL and college football landscapes. How was it for Prime Sports and BetCris after a blistering start to the season, and how was it for you as a bettor?
So Joe will be happy with this. We got slaughtered. It was horrible.
Why would I be happy with that?
No, let's cry for it was a horrible week, but it was just really a bad Sunday. College football was good. I mean, I don't know the stats, but did literally every game go over yesterday after last week being 1-11 under or something like that? Just, there was some WNBA spattered in there. Oddly enough, we lost on the fight, which I was leaning Crawford the whole weekend decision. So, it was a good result. I'd played sort of hard on it being a draw, which, the judges almost tried to make it a draw, I guess, any closer, and they would have got it there. But it was just sort of a spattering across the board. We lost some table tennis, was another little loser there as well. But yeah, just one of those weeks where it looked really good, 9 a.m. Sunday morning when we got Saturday's figures, and then I got the figures this morning, and it was just a blowout.
All right. Well, Joe, we'll see if we can swing the fortunes by coming to you for the back half of this segment. In addition to a college football slate highlighted by a barn burner in South Bend that we don't need to relive for your sake, Saturday night also delivered Canelo Crawford. Sunday delivered another Eagles victory over the Chiefs. So all in all, what stood out to you this past weekend?
What stood out to me, what's killing boxing isn't where the fights are being broadcast, whether it's pay-per-view or Netflix or ABC Wide, World of Sports. I remember that back in the day. It's, they're losing their audience because main events aren't going off until after midnight. Since they announced this fight, I wanted to see this fight. I thought this fight was going to be like Hagler versus Sugar Ray. I mean, just what a lineup. I mean, two of the absolute best going at it. And you get to midnight, they're still waiting to walk on. I fell asleep sitting straight up in my chair in my office. My wife came in at 2:30 in the morning and woke me up and said, "You coming to bed?" I was like, "Oh God, don't tell me who won." And she goes, "I don't care who won," which might be America in a nutshell. So I stopped before I went up. There I was, 2:30 in the morning, fast forwarding through to do it. And it's like, wow, I'm really surprised that we really lost on that. Everywhere else seemed like they were over. I mean, as always happens, the early action comes in on the favorite, which was Canelo, huge. I mean, it was like Mexican Independence Day celebration. Canelo had the stadium. He had, the money, the public money, everything. People are always coming in late on the Challenger on these. So I'm not surprised that it evened up a little bit, but I am surprised to hear that we would have lost on that because I was pulling for a Crawford. I think he's one of the best boxers in the last 50 years with being a switch hitter. He has every skill in the book. And when he weighed in, it's 167.5 and just looks solid. I thought, wow, maybe Canelo really is in some trouble. But even I was like, I don't know. It's a long shot for him to win. So when he did, and he did going away, I was hoping to hear that it was a much better result for us because it should have been. For all the people right now, it's like, oh yeah, but I knew he had it all the way. I was really pulling for him. Like, that's horseshit. It's like the same people who are like picking the Chiefs ahead of the Eagles, absolutely destroying them in the Super Bowl. And now they're all like, oh yeah, I knew the Birds had it all the way. Best team in football. So, but the sad thing is now we'll probably have to wait at least another year or two before we get a fight of even half that quality. Maybe it's the Bivol Beterbiev Part 3 fight that we're going to be getting, but there's not a whole lot of fights out there right now that you could say like even approach that. And then when you talk about like UFC, like there's so many of those, and I don't know who these guys are, and I think the product's really crap and watered down. It really is a tragedy for, well, what they're now calling combat sports, but let's just say it, like boxing is really the most popular of those, and it again shows the diminishing quality of the product out there and how it filters throughout the betting. There used to be no bigger thing, even approaching Super Bowl, than a championship fight in Vegas in sports betting, and even now that's starting to peter out.
All right, guys. Well, we are 99 episodes in with this one. I'll set the over-under on 39.5 for segments on prediction markets, with this one marking the latest. Kalshi's NFL week volume reportedly came in at $266 million, matching last year's U.S. presidential election, according to CEO Tarek Mansour. That said, analysts at Citizens say Kalshi's fee structure made its effective prices worse than comparable lines at FanDuel and DraftKings. So, Adam, want to come to you and check in on the notion of peer-to-peer exchanges supposedly designing prices to be better for bettors. So what do you make of Kalshi's pricing model? And more broadly, what chances do you give prediction markets of catching on a more mainstream basis as lower cost alternatives to sports betting?
Yeah, I mean, I don't get too much into that stuff. I haven't done it enough to sort of see what the charges are. I did hear on, I think it was the last major golf tournament, though a few of them were complaining about how they were getting hit with all the charges when they were the ones that were kind of market making as well. I mean, I'm not, it's been a long time since I've got into the 20 cent versus 30 cent sort of argument, because there's often one side that's better than other. That's why we educate people to shop around. Generally, all these markets, even the sports books, you can get them down to 101, even to 100%, every single game on the board these days. So, it's really just more about where you need to get the action, what you have, where you have liquidity, where you have money, which state you're in, which country you're in, and all these various things. The idea is just to be there and give people an opportunity to play whatever they want to play. You have to build in those costs. Again, I haven't used the UIs enough to understand if they are building in those charges. Are they just charging winners? Are they just charging losers? Or is it based on volume? I know Sport Trade have a UI where you can configure it, where you're getting the commission baked in and things like that. Betfair, again, only the winners pay, losers don't. So there's like 10 different commission versions out there. And I think there's just way too much made of whatever the bottom line charge is. I mean, looking at the numbers, they did good volume. They're doing good numbers. But the one number that I did identify was they were doing a hell of a lot more than 50% on live versus pregame. And I think that's just showing more and more which way the market's heading.
And Joe, if we pivot from Kalshi over to Polymarket, which doesn't operate in the US yet, some have highlighted morally questionable markets, including one on the likelihood of a US civil war and several related to the Charlie Kirk assassination. Where do you draw the line on moral boundaries for prediction markets? And how does that play into the conversation around whether or not some level of approval should be required for posting real world markets?
I mean, morally, where do I stand on it? A lot further back than where they're at right now. There's been a lot of really puffy statements made within the last week or so in response to, states suing them in court and everything about the highly crucial role that prediction markets can play to democracies and markets and everything like that. And right now, if that's true or not, I don't see it playing out this way. Right now, it's stuff like that is ghoulish. The people who are putting it up there are just reprehensible. And you know what? I get it. Like, it certainly, we're talking about it. We're talking about Polymarket and these kind of markets. So I guess in some ways it's smart branding for them, right? This kind of stuff is stupid. I mean, it really is. It's just fucking stupid. And I think whatever they're gaining in the short term about getting their brand out there and the awareness about their product, they're really not providing any kind of valuable insight through the market, through these types of markets. Does anybody really think that they're going to learn more about the potential for America descending into civil war by where the liquidity is going on Polymarket versus what you're going to see on the news and what you're hearing from your political representatives and what you're seeing on social media? There's so much ugliness in America this past week that for these markets to try and capitalize on it this way, it comes away feeling dirty. There probably wasn't too much insightful market expertise in all this, but I just think it is the dumbest thing to be involved with. And, it points to, I think, a problem that CFTC is going to have if their policy in permitting prediction marketplaces is going to be one which they've stated so far, which is hands off and let them grow, rather than setting out rules of engagement, regulations, and then forcing people to comply. You're going to have this kind of ugliness, frankly, play out.
All right. Well, we'll see if certain real world markets get shot down in the future. And in the meantime, the Fair Bet Act has been shot down in Rules Committee. Joe, sticking with you, with the act looking unlikely to become a reality this year, bettors who aren't already carefully tracking their P&L will need to do so in 2026. And now that a couple months have passed since the change to the original tax code was announced, capping the sports betting loss tax deduction at 90%, and with that change seemingly here to stay, at least for now, how measurable do you think its impact will be on the regulated market? And where do you think it'll be felt most?
I definitely think it's going to be felt in the regulated market in a pretty significant way because you're just going to see more liquidity. It's going to flee the marketplace. Everybody still has to pay their taxes. If you're somebody who is using a bunch of movers networks, who are using everybody's 100, closest living female relatives, IDs and accounts to get down, you're a sharp guy. Fine, go with God and do it that way to hide your trades and be able to get down at FanDuel, DraftKings. But if you're not paying your taxes and you're not correctly reporting your taxes, you're going to have big trouble. Anybody who screws around with that. And people, frankly, most of the people we know who are doing that, they know that they don't want to get tripped up on their taxes. When you look at just how razor thin people's margins are right now, this is going to be a big difference maker. And for all the crying that, the AGA and state attorney generals and the big operators do about shutting down the offshore world, shutting down the street, that's going to be the only place that guys are going to be able to flee to potentially get liquidity down, because at least they don't have to worry about somebody in Costa Rica sending a 1099 out, right? They don't have to worry about somebody on the street reporting, wins over $3,000 and things like that. So they'll be able to hide a lot of this stuff. So it's an untenable situation, but it's one that's not going to change, I think, until you get a bill that's introduced by a Republican lead sponsor. All credit to Congresswoman Titus from Nevada for introducing this and trying to be proactive. I found they played her statement at Bet Bash, literally right over my head during our panel that we had on prediction markets and exchanges. And she opened with about 3 minutes of partisan bashing and then tried to say, this is not a partisan issue. Well, it is when you open like this. I think the thing that this needs right now is it needs a Republican to introduce a bill and then have Democrats join in and co-sponsor it. Politics is politics. The Republicans, they're in the majority. They don't see any reason to be able to hand a victory to somebody like Congresswoman Titus, who could potentially use it as a way of beating whoever her Republican challenger is going to be in the next or in the midterm elections. So the other thing is on this. Stop trying to stuff it into things like a defense appropriations bill. It doesn't belong there. It's a waste of time even trying to do it. It's very easy to dismiss it. Like, we're trying to appropriate money for the U.S. Armed Forces, and you're trying to lower taxes for professional gamblers. Rhetorically, it's just stupid to try and put it there. But everybody in Washington's trying to do it with their pet project, with their pet bill right now. Like, what can I tack this thing onto so it's going to get automatic approval, right? It's this game as old as the hills in Washington, D.C., but I don't think it's going to be particularly effective until you have a Republican lead sponsor on this legislation.
And Adam, I heard Joe mention Costa Rica as part of his response there. As someone joining us from Costa Rica while we record this conversation, and also as somebody with strong ties to the regulated U.S. betting market, what do you make of the latest in this unfolding dynamic?
Well, I don't think anyone really expected it to get through. I think everyone's sort of prepared. I think everyone's sort of dug in to see what and where there is, consequences. I've had lots of conversations where sort of arbors were panicking in the beginning, but they seemed like they've found a way that, they've found a way to report it where it's, they shouldn't have any issues and stuff like that. I've spoken to plenty of professional bettors of certain ways they report it, and it shouldn't sort of alter what they're doing. But again, I guess all that comes down to if they ever run into an audit and then the way it's dug into and looked at and all those kind of things, whether they, run into problems then. But I don't think anyone really knows how to do it or what to do. Ultimately, it's report it. And I think some of them are hoping for the best that they never run into that.
The one thing people ought to take comfort from is if there's one thing that's been defunded in our government, it's been the IRS. They've had their budget slashed in half. and their headcount has also been decimated. So for enforcement, audits, things like that, if you just go by that, you're less likely, I guess, to be audited simply because there aren't enough resources out there to go out and audit people, which probably means I just red flagged myself for an audit.
Well, sticking with that perspective of looking for the silver linings in all of this, not a lot of losses for bettors to deduct this past weekend based on what you shared off the top, Adam. So if we want to use that into a springboard and look ahead to week 3 in the NFL and week 4 in college football, where have your opening lines at Prime and BetCris been hit the hardest so far?
So there's a couple on the top of the board. The Colts and Atlanta both open 3, going to 3.5 with money coming their way. Green Bay's seen a lot of early parlays at the -8, a little bit at -8.5. Rams was one that got bought up to 4.5 and 4 very quickly, but then it settled at 3 and was sort of seeing some sharp action at the -3. Seattle, I was sort of looking at the chart and getting confused, but they're just full of ton of teasers on them right now as well, bringing them down to a number where, it's coming over the 7 and whatnot. Dallas, Chicago, both +1 getting action, and San Fran getting a lot of action at +1 and -1 against the Cardinals as well. Kansas City was an interesting one where it was getting some -5.5, -6, and then a few masters sort of brought it up to +8 and +7.5, which actually surprised me a lot as well. And then the one standout, one for you, Matt, college football. USC has got the most action so far, going from -15.5 to 17.5. Some pretty sharp money on that side. And, that's pretty much the summary of the early action right now.
All right, I'll take it. The market backing the Trojans. It seems like there is a night and day split when they are home versus away. So home against Michigan State, hopefully not a big sweat. And anybody who's betting that one, especially on the East Coast, if you couldn't stay up for Alvarez and Crawford, good luck staying up for an 11 p.m. Eastern kickoff between Michigan State and USC. But Joe, I did want to come back to you and get your thoughts on the weekend ahead. You were mentioning before we started recording that your Saturdays might become a bit more free given Notre Dame's 0-2 start. But across the rest of the college football landscape and thinking ahead to week 3 in the NFL with your Eagles off to a roaring start as the defending champs, what are you anticipating in the weekend ahead?
It's funny, Matt, right now, I'm still waiting for the first quarter of the season to be over because all the top teams are underperforming, which is complicating everything from spreads to totals. What I'm thinking more about is right now, baseball is really starting to tighten up. You've got the divisional races seem to be kind of sorting themselves out. Milwaukee, they're by far, they're probably going to have the best record in baseball. Philly's the hottest team. Dodgers are getting healthy, over in the American League. Seattle looking incredibly good in a really tight race over there in the West. It'll be interesting to see, between Toronto, Detroit, and the AL seems less compelling than the NL. National League really seems to be dominant in the league so far this year. And seeing how those wild card races starting to play themselves out here down the stretch. So I know we're very overbalanced on football here, but we're using the baseball playoffs that are upcoming as a springboard to the fact that we're now going to head into the biggest, fattest month in American sports betting, which is October, because we're going to have all 4 of the top leagues are going to be in action. You're going to have, football, baseball, and now we're going to have basketball is going to be coming back. The NHL is going to be coming back. So we're going to go from, it's funny, it seems like how long ago we were just starving for something to do. And then we get a month into football season, and now it's just it's like drinking from a fire hose with betting options that are going to be coming up. So, but the one that I'm most interested in, not only because I'm a Phillies fan, but because it looks like some really interesting matchups for the postseason, is going to be baseball.
All right, and we will keep a close eye on all 4 of the major sports, Joe, to your point, as we head into October. For now, we will tie a bow around this week's episode. And to the audience, whatever happens across legislation on sports betting taxation, prediction market regulation, and market capitalization, and wagers resulting in elation or frustration, thanks as always for tuning in. And with episode number 100, we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Prime Suspects. Register for Prime Sports at primesports.com and download the Prime Sports app. You can follow us on Twitter at PrimeSuspects_, at Joe Brennan Jr., and at Adam Bjorn 2. You must be 21 or over to play on Prime Sports. Always bet responsibly and within your limits. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.